Well, hey, my name is John. I'm the lead pastor at Christ Church Albany, and I want to welcome you to Community Group, week number 1 of the fall. What I believe is that I believe that loving Jesus, loving each other, and loving the world is not just a way to live. I believe that it is absolutely the best way to live. And I think the whole world would be better if everyone was living that way. And as a church, as an organization, we have a couple of different tools to be able to help you either explore whether that's a way of life that you would like to live as well, or how we actually do it, how we actually live these things out in our day-to-day life. And we think one of those tools to either explore or actually live this stuff out is our Sunday morning services. And we are going to do that this fall twice a month on the second and the fourth Sundays, and those can be really helpful, and we help you come to those. But this week is a community group week, and we're going to get together in these small groups of people twice a month. And some of you, maybe you're meeting at the building, maybe some of you are meeting in people's houses, but all a community group is it's a group of people. Sometimes it's a couple of people, sometimes it's like a dozen or so people, but they're together for the purpose of we want to help each other grow. Because when you can grow with other people, when you can ask questions, when you can discuss, when you can discover things on your own, we think it's really one of the best ways to learn. So if you're already in one of our community groups, then that's awesome. I'm glad you're watching in that context, and I hope you have great conversations today. If you are not in a community group yet, we would love for you to sign up for one. So go to the website, email us, and we'll help connect you with hopefully the best group for you. Or maybe some of you are like, all right, I'm not in a community group yet, but I have a few folks that I think would be like, I would love to be in a group with those people. I think that we could all help each other grow. I think we would have great conversation. I just think it would be a really kind of wonderful thing. Then maybe you want to start your own community group. And in that case, still, let us know. We would love to help encourage you and just coach you along as we're trying to all grow to better love Jesus, each other, and the world in this context. And here's what we're going to do in these community groups. Is we're going to go through a process called the Discovery Bible Study. And this isn't something we came up with. This is something that people have done for decades all over the country, all over the world. And it's a way that just really helps us to be able to use Scripture as a way to help each other grow. And so in this Discovery Bible Study, very simple. All of you can do this. You can do this in your groups, and hopefully then you can begin to do this just on your own too, or with other groups of people. Could be really neat. Is you're going to ask the same questions every single week. So whenever you get together, we're going to have a different section of Scripture that we look at, but you're going to ask the same questions. So here's the questions you're going to ask. First, you're with a group of people. And so we think it's super important that you're growing with those people. And so they need to know you and you need to know them. What's going on in your life. So first two questions are this. Go around and everyone who's comfortable in your group share. Number one, what are you grateful for this week? They're not even just like in your whole life, but just like over the last couple days. What are the things going on that you are truly grateful for? And then two, what are the things right now that are a real challenge for you? What are the things that are really, really stressful? So if you're already watching with a group, go ahead and pause me and take time to discuss those two questions. What are you grateful for? And what is it that is a real challenge? What's really stressing you out right now? Then, after you ask that question, so you've unpaused me, then we're going to look at a section of Scripture. And this fall, we're going to be going through a famous sermon that Jesus did. We're going to go through just like about half of the sermon, actually. And it's called the Sermon on the Mount, and we're going to go through Matthew chapter 5. And we're going to read the section of Scripture. And here's what we want you to do in your group, is we want you to have someone in your group read the Scripture. And so today you'll read Matthew 5, 17 through 20. So someone in your group read that. Then have someone else in your group, a volunteer, kind of put it in your own words. Someone kind of paraphrase, all right, so after listening to it, kind of put it in your own words. What did that Scripture say? And put it in your own words. And then we want you to answer these questions. First question is, what stood out in the passage? What is it that kind of caught your ear? What did you have? What did you think was cool? What did you think was exciting? What did you have questions about? What didn't you like? What did you like? What stood out from the verse? Second question, what does this tell us about God? What we believe is that the Bible was written, in this case, this was written by a guy named Matthew 2,000 years ago. And this might be kind of interesting for some of us to think about, is that Jesus said all kinds of things, and he did all kinds of things. And one of the things that the folks who wrote the Bible tell us is that there's no way that they would be able to put everything that Jesus said and everything that Jesus did into it. It's just, he did so much, he said so much. And so, as they were trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to write down? This is something, they're like, okay, this is something that other people need to hear about. This is something that, out of everything Jesus said was great, but this is something that everyone needs to hear. And we think that part of the reason why they wrote down everything that they wrote down is because, number one, they wanted to tell us something about who God is like. Part of the reason why we think we have the Bible is to tell us about what God is like. And so what does this scripture tell us about who God was like? Discuss that in your group. And then secondly, what does this tell us about people? What does this tell us about us? And then go into these three incredibly important questions. First question is, what could you specifically do to live this out? Based off of what you are going to talk about in your group, how could you specifically live this out in your life this week, in your home, in your neighborhood? What would it look like for you if you were to take this as true? If you were to take this, I'm going to apply this to my life. What would that look like for you? And then next, write an I will statement. Based off of what I've learned today, here's what I am going to do this week. And then the next time you guys get together, you can talk about, hey, how'd that go? And that could be a really great conversation. And then lastly, in the course of your discussion, is there something that you heard, something that you learned that you're like, there's someone else I know that could really benefit from hearing that? Is there someone else that I could share this with, of what I've learned today about God, about people, about how I'm going to do this whole thing? So that's what we're going to do. In your groups, you've already talked about what's going on in your life, what you're grateful for, what the challenges are. I want you to read the verse. I want someone else to paraphrase the verse. And I want you to say, what does this tell us about God? What does this tell us about people? How could I specifically apply this to my life? Based off of what we just learned, I will do what this week? And then is there anyone that you can share this with? Before we get into the scripture today, and I'll do this each time you guys get together, I just want to explain a few things from the text that if you're just walking in cold, maybe you might not be just as clear, and hopefully to kind of kickstart your conversation. So the first thing is that as you're going to read the scriptures today, you're going to see this phrase, the law and the prophets. Or I think Jesus says there's the law or the prophets. And what exactly is that? Now, the law of the prophets is shorthand for Jesus, and this is still a lot of the way that our Jewish friends talk about it, is that's what we would often call the Old Testament. That's the Jewish scriptures. That's everything from, the Ten Commandments and everything that Moses did in Egypt and let my people go, and David and Isaiah and Jeremiah, and all these things that happened before Jesus came on the scene, and people wrote it down as a part of the Jewish Bible. They call that the law and the prophets. And it had a lot of things that Jesus said, a lot of things that God said, a lot of things that God commanded, and had a lot of rules. It had 613 different rules. And Jesus had a very kind of clear opinion about what the law and the prophets was all about. And you see that a couple different times that Jesus talks about this. And so one of these he talks about at the end of the Sermon on the Mount that we're going through. At the end of that, in Matthew chapter 7 and verse 12, he says this, "So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets." So Jesus had this, hey, give us like a summary. What's the Bible all about? What's the point of all the law and the prophets? And Jesus in Matthew 7 there says it's do to others as you would have them do to you. The way you treat other people, if you treat other people in the way that you hope other people treat you, then that's kind of the summary of the whole law and prophets. And then later, in Matthew chapter 22, someone asked him, hey, out of the law and the prophets, like, what's the greatest of all the commandments, those 613 commandments? And Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and all the prophets hang on these two commandments. Okay, well, what's the law and the prophets all about? It's all about, Jesus would say, loving God and loving people. So read that through that lens of Jesus. Along with that idea, this whole thing that Jesus is doing is preaching the sermon. It would have had a very it would have been reminding people a lot of the law and the prophets, because one of the central things that happened in the law and the prophets is this guy named Moses who went up onto a mountain and he came down with these stone tablets and it was the 10 Commandments and so much of the law. And now here is Jesus, almost 1,500 years later after Moses. And Jesus is again on a mountain. This is the Sermon on the Mount. And Jesus and the rest of Matthew 5, as you're going to see over the next couple months as we study this together, Jesus is kind of looking at these exact laws that Moses said, but he's tweaking them a little bit. And so Jesus is going to often say, you have heard that it was said, and he'll quote some sort of a big law like, don't murder. And then Jesus is going to say, but I say unto you. And then Jesus is going to give his description of hey, here's what the law said, but now I'm telling you, here's what it really, really means. Because Jesus came to not only just say, hey, here's the rules, here's the law, but to help to show us, here's what it was really, really about. And so lastly, on that note, Jesus is going to talk about in this, he's going to say this phrase, that your righteousness should surpass that of the Pharisees. And so first, that word righteousness, that's a word that means right relationships, is that Jesus wants you to have right relationships. He wants you to have great relationships with people. He wants you to have great relationships with God. Love Jesus, love each other, and love the world. He wants you to have a right relationship with all of those things. And he says there's this group, they were a religious group back then, kind of a political group, the Pharisees, and they were actually, their whole job was to do the rules, was to do the law. And Jesus says, I want you to have better relationships with people and with God than those people who their whole job is to do the rules all the time. And here's just kind of last thought for you to think about before you go into your discussion. Have you ever known someone who they did all the right rules, but somehow it seemed like they were missing something in the process? And so maybe, I think religious context for a second, maybe you knew someone and they seemed to follow they were at church every single Sunday, and they gave money away and they seemed to, but there was something about, they didn't have great relationships with their kids, they didn't have great relationships with their spouse, their partner, maybe they were just, there's just something, they were doing all the right things, but they were doing it in such a way that it seemed, instead of making them more loving, more joyful, more hopeful, it seemed to be making them more angry, more judgmental, or thinking about kind of a different relationship. Folks are married. I'm married, and in marriage, there's these certain things that you do. There's certain rules that I try to I try to be home at a certain time, and you're faithful, and you give anniversary presents, and you go on dates, and there's some folks. And they do that in a way that's just I get to, hey, why are you leaving early? Oh, it's because I get to go home. I'm going to go spend time with my wife. Oh, what are you doing this Saturday? Oh, I got a date night. We're going to go out. Oh, we got our anniversary and I'm going to pick this thing out for her. And then sometimes you talk to other people and they're like, oh, I got the old ball and chain, and I guess I better go home because I don't want to get in trouble. And it's like, oh, it's our anniversary, so I got to figure out something to get. And in both cases, they're both following the rules, but their motivation and their heart is different. And I think that's a big part of this text that you guys are going to talk about today. So take some time in your groups and discuss. Read it. Have someone else give a summary of it. And then what does this tell us about God? What does this tell about people? What would it look like if you were to live this out this week? What's something that you can say, I will do this week, that then the folks in your group can ask you about next time you get together? And out of the course of the conversation, is there anything that comes to your mind that you think, man, my brother, my sister, my coworker, my neighbor, is there anyone else who could benefit from hearing what you just learned? Enjoy your group. I hope this helps you grow, and we'll talk to you soon.